we'd always think of it like you're climbing a mountain. So I'd always think of, you're climbing a mountain, you've got your safety ropes, and I'm kind of behind you, and I got you. And you can go off and do your tasks as someone that works in our team or in my team. And I'm always there behind you, but I want you to go first. And I always think of it as every time you take another step up the mountain, you can kind of let go of the rope a bit. But it's okay, because I'm always going to be behind you. What we realise now is that the kind of future of the workplace, whether it be in life science or in office, is that they're very multi-generational. They are neurodiverse. They want, physically and emotionally supportive workspaces that are digitally connected. They have concerns around planetary health and sustainability. They are looking for authenticity and transparency.
Welcome to the People Property Place podcast. I'm really excited to have Claire Dawe, Head of Asset Management at Stanhope, on the podcast today. But before we get into this episode, I just wanted to thank each and every one of you who's tuned in, listened to the podcast, sent me messages on LinkedIn, messages for support and thanks, and recommendations for which guests we should have on the show. It's been really, really humbling. And we're early on the journey. I think we've released about 35 episodes as of today, but have got grand plans to expand the podcast and bring further guests onto the show. So if you haven't already, please do like, subscribe, or send it to a colleague. It means an awful lot. So, as I said, today on the podcast, we are joined by Claire Dawe, Head of Asset Management at Stanhope. Claire joined Stanhope in September 2018 from Grosvenor Britain and Ireland, where she led the asset management team for the Belgravia portfolio. At Stanhope, she leads the asset management team, which is responsible for a portfolio of just under 6 million square foot and 4 billion of assets under management. Absolutely massive. And as well as her day job, Claire is also a mentor for the Stanhope-backed initiative Mentoring Circle. Claire, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Not at all.
Surreal.
Well, it's an episode that I'm actually really, really looking forward to. But I guess a place that we always start these conversations is how did you get into real estate and why real estate?
So way back when, not to give you all of my history, but I thought I wanted to be a geography teacher, actually. So property, real estate was never, ever on the cards. And then probably at the moment of serendipity, and probably very fortunately, I got terrible predicted grades, whereby my Italian teacher during my A-levels predicted me a U, which, by the way, Matt, is a complete fail.
Okay,
it's
for
so
others,
brutal.
that is
brutal. She could have even said an N, which is a near miss, but it was a complete flat U, which ended up meaning that I took a year off between A-levels and uni because I wanted to apply to university with my proper grades. For the university I wanted to go to, which was Birmingham, which was still to do geography. And rather fortunately, I went travelling around the world with my 4 friends and actually met my husband. At the time, he gave me 2 wonderful kids. So that was, meant to be, obviously. But it meant that I applied to Birmingham Uni with my grades, better grades.
So you're a perfectionist, are you?
Perfectionist, hugely. Although it's not, so you can go much further up than that. I got into Birmingham to do geography, and one of those modules was planning. And I spent 3 years at Birmingham, and my dissertation was around the Birmingham Bullring, which was a big kind of regeneration project. And I found myself talking to surveyors. And I remember thinking, I've never spoken to a surveyor. Don't they just wear hard hats and, measure stuff? And it was amazing, really. They were, regenerating, creating new places. And I found it absolutely fascinating.
So no family, no friends in real estate?
No family, no friends, no connection to the real estate industry whatsoever, other than a terrible A-level grade, a slightly, not purist kind of geography route in. And that sort of saw me do a conversion into a master's into property valuation and law. And I decided to then start, Googling the RICS, which was a long time ago, Matt. Probably before, it was back in 2003.
Dial-up internet.
Absolutely it was, the pinging around, totally. And the RICS had a brochure promoting females in the industry. And I remember reading it and thinking, God, this sounds great. I don't have to, sit in an office all day, get to talk to people, check. I've just been travelling as well and just, had a very expansive mind. And there was just a huge call for females. And so finished the Masters, went to Colliers, got a grad scheme there, which was brilliant for 2 years. They had an intake of 15. I was the only female back in the day. So just shows you how it's
changed. That marketing campaign didn't really push the dial.
So much. Actually, even worse was when I did my Masters. Out of 80, an intake of 80, there were two women.
Really?
Yeah, it's so severe, but I don't think I really noticed at the time. Plus, I've got brothers and all my cousins, so I was constantly stuck in goal and, all that kind of stuff. But I know, I just don't think I really noticed. It's funny, but not just to totally bring up the female thing, but it was, it was a completely different time to how it is now. And I did my graduate at Colliers, which I loved, qualified into property and asset management department. And then very quickly after being qualified, the Grosvenor estate call came knocking.
So what rotations did you do at Colliers? What did that look like?
Valuation, you sort of have a very standard 6-month valuation kind of placements.
Yeah.
But I spent about a year in the property and asset management department learning nuts and bolts of property, which was just brilliant because you really understand the fundamentals. Worked in valuation, a bit of leasing.
Yeah.
Didn't love the leasing actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know. Even though I quite like it now.
Yeah.
But at the time, it didn't resonate. Maybe it was just, I think retail at the time was just very kind of cookie cutter and, the typical mainstream brands and offices for the clients that we were working with at the time. It wasn't like, period properties or anything particularly interesting. So asset management I just found fascinating, that it had a whole spectrum of different kind of pieces to it. So qualified into that, and then Grosvenor Estates came along.
So how did you choose Grosvenor, and how did that come about?
So I got headhunted for it. I know, it's like, which kind of seems a bit, again, surreal for me. You'll notice I have moments of total pinch me moments where they just call me. But it did, and I had quite early on in my mind kind of created what I called the board I can't afford. So I had people that I would just use as a sounding board, actually, that I'd met.
Really?
Yeah. Actually, I've always kind of sought opinion, and it's always been quite a thing for me, even though some of the board members don't actually know that they're on the board, but in my own mind.
So you've got this like mental note of how many people?
Oh, maybe 6 actually.
Really?
And then the board sounds awful.
No, I love it.
But the board gets upgraded. So once as you evolve, throughout your career, there'll be, people you seek opinion from, and then that will change depending on, where you're kind of at in your career. And I've always
take your learnings from them.
Yeah.
Learn what you can, and then you'll upgrade your board and seek someone else up to push you further.
But it is that is actually what I do. Yeah. And at the time, I remember some of the board members, some of my kind of good mates actually, just saying, and people that worked in the industry saying, you're best to stay at Colliers, grow a bit more, learn a bit more, make your mistakes there. And I remember thinking, mid-20s, thanks very much, off skis, off she goes. And it was one of the best moves I made.
Why did they tell you to stay at Colliers?
I think...
Is that because they were equity partners at Colliers? Or
yeah, totally.
or,
I don't know.
Or they did that in their career, because I find that quite fascinating.
Yeah, I think...
Almost telling someone to do what they did to self-prove,
like
justify their... Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think so. It was an uncomfortable move for me anyway, because it was, pure asset management, and I'd qualified into a department that was property management slash asset management. So I'd been there for 6 months. I was leading a very small portfolio for Smith's Properties at the time. Probably doesn't exist now. And I just didn't have much experience. But during my interview stage, just from a fit perspective, I was working on the Mayfair office portfolio. It just kind of clicked, and with that team, it just felt right. So, and it was a risk.
Of course.
It felt like a risk, but it felt like something that I couldn't not do. So
it's a reversible risk, though, isn't it? I often find,
Yeah.
some of the agencies are very good at telling people to stay,
Yeah.
and their earnings increase exponentially. But actually, the skills and the ability that they have
yeah.
does, of course, increase. But trying to get over to the principal side when you've done 5 years in property management is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Because you're competing against people already on the principal side.
Totally.
So actually, as you did, jumping off early
Yeah.
and learning,
Totally.
and you could always get a job if it
If it didn't work,
you
absolutely.
can land back in the same team.
And I was just so curious because you'd make recommendations to the client and then they'd go into the ether and be like, yes, we've kind of come back, we'd want to change that. And I was always like, why are they doing that? What's led to that decision? And I think it was that curiosity that just knew it was the right, role for me.
Yeah.
And I ended up being at Grosvenor for 10 years. 2 children in between that, but I just had the best time. And I moved around the business there. I was fortunate enough to move around the business every 2 years, actually.
Because Grosvenor is not just Mayfair and Belgravia estate. It's a massive
It's
international conglomerate, really, right?
Completely. Although I was actually on the London estate. In fact, actually, the whole time I was there, I was on the London estate. But you're right. No, it has its own development team. It's international business. Yeah, it's
indirect.
Indirect. Yeah,
the fund management, third party stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the Landlords estate isn't one of their primary kind of drivers. They've got a whole host of other businesses that you'll be surprised about. Who wants to Google that? But yeah. So, and it was a family-owned business. It's owned by the Duke of Westminster. Privately owned, very values driven, and I just met some incredible people there, incredible mentors, worked on incredible projects, and I probably I get a bit bored easily. So I think I'm sort of working and always concentrating on what I'm doing, but also sort of looking around a bit.
Going, what's next?
Yeah,
how can I challenge and push
so.
myself?
Yeah, and. That's probably exactly what I do.
So you went to Grosvenor, you work in the London estate, you said you moved every couple of years. What were you actually doing when you were there? What kind of assets, what kind of projects? How did your kind of growth and trajectory look like?
So initially I was working on the Mayfair portfolio, just offices. It was around kind of pre-Lehman Brothers. So we had sold 43 Grosvenor Street, actually, was one of my first kind of sales there. And it was a period office building, and it was sold at just above £2,000 square foot cat val. And it was like the, kind of target to beat. We just let 77 Grosvenor Street at the highest rent in, that market at the time. It felt, funny enough, it felt very easy. Doing lots of mini developments and CapEx projects, purely offices. The business was arranged around sectors rather than kind of locations.
So you worked across offices across a broad range of geographies within their estate,
Totally.
not just like a place.
No, not just exactly. But it was there was 2 estates. One's Mayfair and one's Belgravia. So knocking around Mayfair was pretty easy. I mean, it was the best train set to learn on. In fact, that whole time of my career was just utterly brilliant. And then Lehman Brothers happened, and it was difficult. And I think the business was looking at what its future looked like. We're looking at a restructure, and I was really fortunate, and I got sort of handpicked to work with. They had some management consultants come in at the time. So this is around 2008, 2009. And there was a small Grosvenor team that were kind of put together to work on what they thought was a change management programme. So I was taken out of property completely for a year, working with, there were about 4 of us in the Grosvenor business and 4 other management consultants. And it was totally, I'm looking back now, and it was so gnarly because you got to kind of look at the whole business and really understand the principles of the Grosvenor business and, what was working, what wasn't, where roles needed to be, where the commercialities needed to be. And my role as part of that was kind of communications as a kind of change management piece within the business. I led a few of the work streams as well, but I had to report to the executive steering committee. And it meant that I would often find myself sitting in a room not much bigger than this actually. And I was young, I'm young, and
you're what, a few years post-qualified?
Probably 3 years post-qualified. And I'm finding myself sitting in a room with our CEO, the head of the London estate, head of the development piece, general counsel, the whole kind of the big wigs of Grosvenor. And it was really, I keep saying the same thing, but it really was just fantastic. The quality of the conversation that I was exposed to, the ideas, the kind of honesty around the business. It was just brilliant. And it's funny because I think as a young surveyor, I think I was always kind of quite naively optimistic. So I always thought, there'd be moments where you'd have these kind of great experiences, but also, I'm sitting in the room going, hold on a second, is this actually happening? God, then I'd be, have complete imposter syndrome. So, it was just confidence-wise, it was brilliant. Vulnerability-wise, it was brilliant. Learning, growth, all of that. And there were a few of us in the business. We ended up restructuring the business. And off the back of that, I got promoted and then was an associate director. And we set up a new Grosvenor investment team on the London estate.
So it was because of 2007, 2008, it prompted a strategic review of the business.
Yeah.
And you were kind of handpicked along with some external management consultants to kind of audit and review the business and then put some recommendations forward about how you can move forward and improve and take the learnings from quite a challenging period.
Yeah, totally.
What were you doing differently to your peers to get selected to be on that project? Because I think it's probably a learning for people listening to this because they wouldn't have just selected someone who's doing, who's getting a U in their asset management work, right?
It was my Italian. It was my Italian
you're
teacher.
Italian, yeah. So, they wouldn't be selecting someone who's kind of operating at that level to go on a strategic review. What were you doing differently and what kind of behaviours are you doing day to day to get kind of recognised?
It's quite, I don't know if this is a massive overshare or not, but I just think sometimes, Matt, I wasn't as astute, maybe I'm not that astute now, in things that you say and things that you don't say. And I remember I was just sort of looking around the business kind of in 2008, or maybe, it must have been early 2009, thinking, I'm frustrated by this and I'm frustrated by this and we could do this differently. And I'd gone on a holiday with some friends, some girlfriends, and I'd come back to the business a week later. And I think I was obviously quite a party and I was quite tired. And it's probably a massive overshare. And the head of the London estate at the time, Giles Clark, who I think is great, by the way, I had a catch up with him and he said, how's it going? And I said, well, Giles, this is how I think it's going. And I sort of told him how I kind of thought things were just, could be done slightly differently. And I think just brutal honesty, actually, and truth. And I think sometimes when you're in these very big businesses, there's, I don't know how much people are really very
prepared to put themselves out to
maybe
call what needs to be called.
I think so, maybe. And maybe because I'd come off a holiday and I was so fed up I wasn't, not because I was so fed up, because I wanted, I was so invested in the business and I wanted to make a difference. And it's funny, I remember thinking, God, came out of the room, Giles is brilliant, obviously, and thinking, oh, did I see too much?
Am I going to get a tap on the shoulder and hoofed out?
Off she goes, bye. And then he said to me, yeah, can we have a catch-up meeting? And then, said to me, we're going to have these management consultant teams in. I'd love for you to join the team. And I was like, oh my God, absolutely. And I thought it was brilliant. I mean, we're working a kind of 3-month sprint, they called it, to kind of really understand all parts of the business to see if there was enough in what we thought was improvement to kind of bring forward to the next stage. And we were working, early mornings, late evenings. The management consultants we were working with, they were called Boxwood Consulting. They just thought very differently than anything I had kind of been exposed to before. And maybe because I was a surveyor, I was always thinking about the property or the real estate, and I wasn't thinking about the business or the commercials. I hadn't, at that point in my career, it wasn't really, it was consideration for somebody else.
Yeah, you're looking at that small cog as part of the bigger thing, but actually just gave you an opportunity to zoom out and look how it all fitted together.
Yeah, and then, they were doing things like giving us a reading list around change management, or, great kind of growth books like Stephen Covey's, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I was in, I was like, the light bulbs on. It was such a difference for me. I loved every minute of it, and it was utterly transformational.
So you took those learnings and then applied that back when you kind of came back and you got promoted into being an asset.
Into the investment team.
So you moved into the investment team. So an associate director, then you moved into the investment team. And why did you move into the investment team?
I think at the time that's just suited my kind of skill set. It was very much setting up a new investment team across the estate. We had a war chest of capital, in quite a difficult market for people that didn't have cash.
Yeah.
And had some good relationships in the market, working really closely with Tim Reed, actually. He's no longer at Grosvenor Estates, but he was brilliant. And we set the business up, and I did that for a couple of years. Bought some great assets, sold some things I didn't want to sell, but we did it. And again, just kind of not really been in the investment world before. I got to learn, how that world works and how to buy off market and as the freeholder, and buying your long leaseholds and what that means in terms of value and the strategy around that, the negotiation. Very different to asset management, actually.
Do you think that stint has made you a better asset manager?
Oh, definitely. From a valuation perspective.
Can you? What do you mean specifically by that?
Just the way you're always thinking about value. And I think an asset manager is always thinking about value, but sometimes you get so into the operations and the team that you're running, or the lease, or the tenant's business. You have to come up the helicopter view and think about the total value. And I think
what's the strategy, and actually what are you going towards?
Yeah, completely. And then I was in the investment team for a couple of years, had my youngest, and then came back and qualified kind of into lead the asset management team at Grosvenor, and in Belgravia at the time. And then, as if that wasn't quite enough, I got asked to lead a development project called Eccleston Yards. It's in Victoria, working with a brilliant team there, the development team, where we kind of converted kind of some garages and a courtyard into a kind of mixed-use estate. You should go check it out if you haven't seen it. It's brilliant. And I led that. I had my asset management team, the development project, and ended up leading the location team at the time as well, which it was a moment. It was just a really busy moment, and there were some internal reasons why that happened. But again, just from a kind of bandwidth perspective, I just absolutely love the juggle.
How? Because there's one thing going from being an asset manager, and a very competent asset manager, and knowing your assets, and getting the transactional experience and kind of piecing it all together. There's another then being responsible for other asset managers and their business plans, and that flowing through. How did you find that journey, going from being on the tools to kind of helicoptering up and managing other people and managing areas?
It's very different. I mean, again, talking about Grosvenor a lot, but the business are brilliant in terms of learning and development. I had great coaches and mentors to help me with all of that. But I also think I knew how I liked to be managed. And, certainly my kind of way was always, I guess it's kind of, we'd always think of it like you're climbing a mountain. So I'd always think of, you're climbing a mountain, you've got your safety ropes and I'm kind of behind you and I got you. And you can go off and do your tasks as someone that works in our team or in my team. And I'm always there behind you, but I want you to go first. And I always think of it as every time you take another step up the mountain, you can kind of let go of the rope a bit. But it's okay, because I'm always going to be behind you. And that analogy has just worked so brilliantly for, I think, hopefully my team would say so now, but also the team at the time. And I think I never liked to be, managed very, someone show me the way and I'll follow. That can be really helpful, but I didn't think I learned very quickly when that happened. So I don't know, just intuitively, that's always the way I've kind of managed my team, and I like being around people and
trying to get the best out of other people, supporting, enabling, and giving them the platform to go and do their best work.
That's a much better way of saying it.
I'm not sure about that. So tell me then, because we've obviously spoken a little bit about Grosvenor. You had the team, excellent. What was the point at which you thought a change is needed, or how did kind of Stanhope come into to the frame?
It was 2018. I'd been doing, working at Grosvenor for a big period of time. They had another restructure, and really I just started to kind of look around a bit. And sort of looking back now, I think I probably got to where I could have got to at Grosvenor. And I just thought, I'm just going to start to look around a little bit. The restructure had happened, I'd been through a restructure before and what that meant. And I think I thought I was always going to move to another landed estate, and was at the time talking to a few other people. And then the Stanhope opportunity came up, and embarrassingly, I knew nothing about Stanhope. I'd heard of them, but I'd been so in the estate bubble that I hadn't totally, appreciated all that they are. Well, also because they've been so under the radar. Well, they're obviously the best developer in London and asset manager, I'm going to say it. But they're the best developer in London, were known as that. But they were very private about their communications and their PR. But actually, Stanhope have built half of London, if you actually look at the map. I mean, David Camp's an absolute genius, along with, the team that were there for years. And, built the Tate and Rothschild building, Bloomberg, and a whole host of other buildings that, you won't even know about that they've built. So embarrassingly, I had to go off and do my research and realise they were who they were.
So for someone who doesn't know who Stanhope is now, who are Stanhope? Can you fill them in over and above what you've just said in terms of the business?
Yeah,
a little bit of history on it and a bit of an overview, because it's a massive entity, right? It's different. It's different in terms of Grosvenor, in terms of scale, but it is still a phenomenal business.
So there's 60 people. They're a huge developer. Built some of the best buildings in London. We're working on projects in Oxford. Oxford North is a big innovation district that we're working on with Cadillac Fairview and Thomas White Oxford. We've got projects like the British Library extension. Royal Street's a huge kind of mixed-use life science site we're working on. We're known for Chiswick Park, which was very, very before its time. Which is an area, kind of office campus in Chiswick, where the ethos, your kind of operational ethos of enjoy work was kind of first coined. And it was where people, 20 years ago were coming to work to learn the guitar, and everyone was branded in yellow, and it was a real success. It was with Schroders at the time. They're just a big developer and now asset manager as well.
And they take on some chunky schemes, right? That people wouldn't dare go near.
No, absolutely. So White City, I think, is a really good example of that. If you were to Google White City 5 years ago, you would get, all of the crime that would have come up. And today you get television centre, 1 million square feet, 430 homes. There's a members club there. Publicis, the home of Publicis advertising there. The BBC, ITV Studios are there. And White City Place, which is a life science and kind of creative campus, which was incredibly difficult to unlock the structure that was for sale actually up in 2015. It's a big refurbishment that took place. The BBC was home to the whole of the BBC, public side of the BBC, and they were rationalising their space, and it was up for sale. And Stanhope unlocked that, refurbished the spaces, added some buildings, and now again there's 1 million square feet. I've got 35% of it are life science occupiers. Netta Porter are there. ITV just got their headquarters there. Yeah, it's huge. They work, mixed use estates, large mixed use estates are, I think, what Stanhope's really known for, and obviously much more recently life science as well.
Yeah, and they, in terms of a developer, they will find the scheme, find the site, and then find the capital to back it.
Yeah.
And these business plans, typically, how long are they, would you say?
It depends on the investor. So we've got 3 main investors, which are Cadillac Fairview, Mitsui, Fudosan, and Aimco, invest in the business. And obviously there's Stanhope and Dawe Camp as well, and there's a management team. But it just depends on the business plan. Sometimes there'll be, we'll source those opportunities. Joe Binns on our investment teams, head of our investment, is brilliant. You should meet him. And he will find those opportunities along with David. And and then we'll kind of pair them with the right investor, and that's either our own investors or third party investors as well. We work with a number of others, Schroders, Mitsubishi Estates, a number of people, and. Sometimes they'll develop to hold depending on the investor's business plan. Sometimes we'll exit kind of post-lease up. So it depends.
So you were brought on to the kit that I'm assuming was developed to hold?
Yes.
Given the ongoing asset management requirement.
Yeah.
So what did your role look like, and what did you kind of get into when you joined?
It was, really, I hope no one kills me for saying this.
Say it.
Say it. Oh, here you go. You can see the overshare. Sometimes she says things she's not supposed to. But I think that it's fair to say Stanhope had, dabbled in asset management, had always dabbled in asset management, but there was no real function that was set up. It felt very much like a startup in a much more established business. I arrived, and there was Television Centre and White City Place, and it was me. And I had to say, the whole thing had to be set up. The reporting, the whole platform, how we did things, working with the partners. Obviously we worked with great partners before, but specifically how we went about, appointing our partners, the whole
thing,
the whole piece.
And so the learnings from your time at Grosvenor in terms of like a condensed location and how it all fitted together, I guess, is super valuable in terms of bringing that all into to Stanhope.
It's funny when I look back now that it was probably all just supposed to unfold like that, but that all of that incredible 18 months of understanding how the nuts and bolts of business really works, the culture, the team, all of that, I brought all of that with me to Stanhope.
What were some of the challenges with setting up this function?
Finding the right people to help me. The point at which I was able to go out and recruit the team. I very quickly found Vanessa Murray, stole Vanessa Murray from Savills. John Redfern will never forgive me, but he does. We work closely together now. And Vanessa, who leads Mentoring Circle, is just an absolute superstar. And initially she came to join me for 6 months, and we bonded, fell in love. and
you kept her?
Kept her, yeah, absolutely. And really it was very much Vanessa and I kind of in the trenches, if you like, for probably 18 months. And then we just bought in a building in Chiswick in February 2020, just before the pandemic. And the asset was great, but it was really hard. It was really difficult. And it was kind of then trying to find, after Vanessa, who's the next person that I need that's got a very different skill set to her.
Yeah.
And what that looks like. And that took about 18 months.
Wow.
And then I found James Hutchinson. And then very quickly after James, there's Sean and Dan now, Michael. There's 8 of us now.
And what were the kickers? What were the kickers that you had to go through in order to hire those people? Was it fee revenue or assets or projects that were coming out?
Tiredness, fatigue. All of that.
What had to happen for those to get unlocked?
Do you know what's really silly to say is that I think sometimes when you're in doing the work, you're just in it. And I think there was a point in time where I was so in it, I forgot to kind of come up and be like, hold on a second, I've got to go and recruit.
I've got to work on it.
It was different. And I can't, totally remember that moment. COVID's never a good time to recruit, but it would have been around that time. And we had to ride that out for a bit. But also, the business grew it's grown 5 times since 2019. We've got 10 mandates now. So yeah, absolutely, fee and revenue, breadth, complexity. Typically, Matt, we look after mixed use estates, life science, anything tall, anything in the City of London. Got a few assets in Cambridge because of the life science piece, but that's typically us. So anything sort of kind of super complex, we do, really well with. So yeah, a kind of mixture of things.
And what do you look for when you recruit people? I appreciate you said there's lots of different skill sets, but what is that in an individual or a skill set on their background that you're like, oh, I kind of want them. I need them to come and join me.
I think we all joke internally and we say we're like same but different. That kind of Venn diagram bit. And I think, what do I look like? So it's such a good question because I'm looking at the team now and they're all very similar in terms of, hardworking, conscientious. They love to smash. We love to have fun. We're working hard, but everyone's very invested in it. But we're all very different. And certainly some of us have got much more analytical minds. Really drill down and down and down. Very financially orientated, whereas others are just a bit broader, more market facing. So it depends, and kind of pairing people to the right portfolio was really important as well because the assets are really complex and the nuances between, say, Television Centre and 8 Bishopsgate, which we've just completed in the city, they're completely different. So just really a good spread, but characteristically, curious, inquisitive minds, someone that's agile, I think as well. We've got a framework, but we're a really small team. And sometimes you find yourself doing things you might not consider, an asset manager would do, but you're okay to you're okay to know that you don't always know what you're doing, or be able to go and find the answer to something, be tenacious and resilient and be comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think. Yeah.
Can you talk to me about life sciences? Because it's quite an interesting part of the market at the moment, right? And there's quite a lot of people trying to access it in one form or another.
Yeah.
And I guess you touched on earlier, like innovation real estate. It's kind of really being called and branded up at the moment.
Yeah, it has. Everyone's a life science developer at the moment. But we really are. And so, we look after White City Place, which 30% of our occupiers there are life science tenants. And again, that's been, completely new. I've been learning all things science and working very closely with Imperial University, who are opposite us in White City, across the road. And we've been thinking, operationally, White City Place was built for offices. We've been able to convert those offices into laboratories. And, we've got some big names there. We've got Novartis, the big pharma. We've got, actually they've just been acquired by Takeda, who's the VC funding, but Gamma Delta's there. Ingitics, they're a big kind of cell and gene therapy cluster, really, we've got there. And we've been learning all about the ecosystem, talking to those occupiers, what they need, looking at their business plans, looking at their funding cycles, their challenges. It's been so interesting, completely different again.
Really?
Yeah.
What just so broad or so different in terms of like what you're kind of, what the tenant or the office occupier you thought would be occupying that space actually needed compared to what the market is.
A good example is, and one that I frequently cite actually, is, your post room. It's most kind of basic, kind of operational. Your post room, is used to receiving deliveries, but when you've got life science tenants, they're receiving deliveries that are live enzymes that have to be collected, within a period of time. And there's just, it's their needs are completely different to, you as an office occupier's needs. And more than that, they're scientists. They're in the discovery process. They're concentrating on the science or their fundraise. They're not thinking about the real estate. And, they grow very fast. So as an asset manager, you're thinking about, okay, you think you understand their business plan, but there's that pivot point of how fast they're growing, and then when they might need to move and what space you've got. And they're not always thinking about it, and then they'll come knocking on the door. So you as an asset manager, you're thinking about the structural void that you might need to keep within the portfolio, because it would be a tragedy to lose any of your life science occupiers within the innovation district that that's been created there. Or you're thinking about, how can I attract more life science occupiers, and they have challenges around, particularly when they're very small, in that startup spin out of university kind of size. Sharing of equipment, how you can make that really easy for them, working with the university, thinking about basic things like internships. They want, interns, and how they advertise for that. So the notice board, operationally, we're thinking about how can we help them with that. A lot of the scientists, also something I learned talking to scientists, they're actually, not my words, actually the scientists' words to me, very quiet people. And they're not sort of naturally good at kind of serendipitous moments or asking for help. That typically happens in the pub. So, and actually the pub has to be the grubbier the better. So in our portfolio, we'd put a wine bar, quite a sophisticated kind of wine bar. And typically a scientist will set up their experiment, and it will take a period of time until the end of that experiment, and they want somewhere to sit, and they want to sit in a grubby pub where they can talk to their, other scientists around innovation and problems that they need to solve, that, and then they want experiences or like sort of sharing, and they want to do that somewhere kind of a bit dark and a bit grubby, apparently.
Yeah, not a pristine wine bar that's,
totally.
could, change the alcohol out, and it could be a lab.
Yeah, completely.
And we spoke off mic, didn't we, about where talent fits in with this. Yeah. Can you just elaborate on that further? Because I think it's a really fascinating point.
Yeah. So one of the things that we discovered talking to those occupiers is that one of the biggest challenges they face is around talent. Why would you come to London when you can go to the kind of golden triangle of Oxford or Cambridge or North America? And really, it's very much around what's the role for the asset manager in that. And we've been doing quite a lot of work around what it really means to be able to attract talent. And it's not just a kind of domestic issue, it's very much a kind of global issue now. And I think you could very easily try and solve it kind of generically. You might need to put a gym there, in your kind of, in the spaces that you can control. You might say, I'll stick a gym in the building, I'll put some good food and beverage, I will have great coffee. Or I'll put on some classes, which everyone seems to be doing across London now, as kind of cookie cutter enlivenment strategies, like puppy therapy or whatever. But actually, I think in our own research, we think that kind of misses the point entirely. And I think what we realise now is that the kind of future of the workplace, whether it be in life science or in office, is that they're very multi-generational. They are neurodiverse. They want physically and emotionally supportive workspaces that are digitally connected. They have concerns around planetary health and sustainability. They are looking for authenticity and transparency. these are the people that are using your spaces. And if you can, and at a granular level, understand the different users, then those users, well, you can design programs, whether it be events and enlivenment programs or physical spaces around what they need, but they can see, they will feel understood, they will feel seen, and it means that, as office occupiers or life science occupiers, their talent is happy, and everyone's looking for a productivity solution, and that means happy talent, happy workforce, and you want to become so good at understanding that and the nuances around that these people only want to be in Stanhope asset managed buildings, and then as they grow, we'll build them their next building. So it's something that we're thinking about really deeply, and that might be kind of flipping it on its head and taking a box of issues that someone is concerned with, an individual, Gen Z is concerned with, and thinking about what would the enlivenment program look like that? What would the events program look like that would mean someone would come along and have that sort of social experience or educational experience. So yeah.
It's fascinating, like really trying to serve your occupiers.
Yeah.
Because I guess there's a hell of a lot of demand for these types of occupiers, but also keeping them, enabling them to do their best work.
Yeah.
Which is going to be like net business, paying better rents, retention, and all the rest of it that comes off the back of it.
And it's changing so fast as well. I think even if I look at, my own children, they're, classified as Generation Alpha, and 65% of the roles that they'll do aren't even invented yet. And, they're the generation. So they're 10.
They're 10.
Sorry, 11. God, I can't believe we got that wrong. 11 and nearly 9.
11 and 9, wow.
Yeah. But they're the generation that they're the kid entrepreneurs, I think they're called. The YouTube generation. They're the generation that will want to join businesses that reflect their values, and therefore the workspaces have to reflect the values of their people. And yeah, it's kind of quite complex when you kind of gaze into the future and look at how different it could be, and we ask ourselves questions like, if you paid to go to work like you would do a private members club, what would it need to look like? And so yeah, there's just a lot of work we're doing from an asset management perspective that we see as a real opportunity to kind of use that, not to mention pick buildings that are in the best in class buildings in the best locations, with these, events, enlivenment, physical spaces that meet that generation's demand, I think. Yeah.
How do you go about structuring leases then? Because there's a value, as you touched on earlier in the conversation, from a transactional perspective. How do you link value, but like flexibility and enablement?
Yeah, to all of that.
To all of that.
Do you know what? I mean, what an opportunity for someone to figure out, because honestly,
let me know.
Do let me know. We were talking about it as a team the other day. We were just saying, everyone's working 3 days a week. You've got leases now for the whole week. And I know flex providers have looked at that. I don't know, Matt, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, certainly on the life science side, from the kind of whole ecosystem, from the spin out, to the SME, so forgive me for telling you things you already know, but the kind of typical journey is you'll be in university, you'll spin out, you'll take an incubator space, become, a startup, come out, take a small space, then you'll have your first round of funding, you'll grow into this kind of SME sector, and then you'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's around the operating model of that, because the fundraise for life sciences are, they want to put that into the discovery process, they want to put that into the innovation and science, and yet X% of it is operational, occupational costs. Well, if they're going to grow and you've bet on the right occupiers, could you look at a revenue model where you fit out a lab for them, you don't take a rent, but you say, when you're at this revenue, we'll take a percentage of that revenue. So maybe there's flexibility more around revenue models than, time-based.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Or even like investing in their platform.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, backing a few, knowing that a couple will fail, but some will get really big.
Yeah, and I think
And
that certainly
capturing more of
does
an upside
happen
there.
in the States, certainly. I think it can be quite punitive for some of them, and I know a lot of the universities in North America do that, and that can be a pull or a push factor for some of the businesses, but
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a challenging time, though, in the market more generally, right? Yeah. What distinguishes like a good asset manager to someone who's like quite average? And because it's value creation, but it's also value protection as well, right? You're constantly trying to juggle a few different hats.
Yeah, I think it very much depends on your investors' requirements and what their investment criteria is. We're very much led by that. I think we again, I can only look at our competitors, but we're in there on the operational side for our assets. We are in the granular detail with our tenants, understanding what's going on, working with the property managers. We've set up the estates teams. We're in all of the complexity, so we're constantly assessing. Is this a moment? Is it a hold or sell moment? There's just constant questions that we're asking ourselves, or thinking about what we're going to do with retail space, or is there an alternative, or is there a development play here? And I think that's been very helpful being part of a development business. You've got so many brilliant people and brilliant heads around the Stanhope business. I think, we're always talking, every 2 weeks as a team to figure out, reviewing commercially all of our assets. So I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe I haven't been around enough average asset managers to know
just high performing ones.
Yeah.
What the role of an asset manager is changing, right?
Yeah.
Is it compared to maybe when you got into it, and you left college and joined Grosvenor?
Yeah.
How do you think the future of asset management looks? Is it just building on what you've just spoken about constantly pivoting, looking at alternative ways, trying to get ahead of the curve in terms of competitors, enabling your occupiers to do their best work to pay you the best value, or will it get compartmentalised because it'll get to a point where it's so varied?
I don't know. I think I just think the breadth that we're dealing with
across all the subsectors,
across everything at the moment, just feels like a lot, and that's even in terms of we're involved with setting up apps, on a digital strategy now. The whole piece, pre-development, tendering the property manager, the digital strategy, move-ins, lease up, fit outs, the business plan, releasing, re-gears, seeking opportunity. I don't know. I just think the spectrum. Yeah, I think the breadth that we're involved with at the moment.
It's massive.
It's huge.
Compared to 15 years ago, when it was like the investment individual
you
dumped a folder on your desk and go, re-gear these leases or what have you.
Look
or
at
that's
this
what
lease
you did.
event schedule. These are the breaks. This is your competitor.
Sort that out and then exit it.
It's completely different. Completely different, yeah.
Can we touched on that earlier? Can you talk to me a little bit about Mentoring Circle and what it is? And Vanessa and your involvement.
No, completely. Gosh, Vanessa Murray set up. She's brilliant. She actually had an idea that she just thought young females in coming into the world of work, 2 years post qualified, wouldn't have anyone necessarily. They didn't have a good network. And so she decided to change that. And there was a small team at Stanhope that helped her just with our own experiences of setting up the business. Yep. And now, gosh, I don't know the stats, Matt. Sorry, Vanessa. But it's absolutely, huge. I think she takes on 100 mentees every year. So 2 years post-qualified. And they get paired with a mentor. And there's... it's a free program. Yeah. So there's lots of events that take place. You have your mentee for a year, and you're sort of meeting them once a month, and giving them a steer really early on. 2 years into your career, it's such a pivotal time. Would have been the time that I'd moved to Grosvenor, and just really connecting them. There's such a time, malleable time to just come out of doing your APC and think about what you want to do. Having a good network to bounce ideas off, having the board you can't afford, that kind of stuff. Knowing when to say yes, when to say no to things, being curious, knowing you always don't have to know the answer to everything. Typically a lot of the things that the mentees that I've had in the third year now have struggled with. So it's a brilliant initiative, and everyone should check it out.
Sending the elevator back down, making it easier.
Yeah, completely.
So, looking forward then, what are you most excited about? I mean, we're sat here kind of middle of August 23. What are you excited about as we kind of look forward?
Yeah. We're coming into a really busy time. I think, just for me personally, just continuing to grow the Stanhope business. And the platform's set up now. The team are in place. We're very self-sufficient. There's lots of great organic growth coming through from the development side from Stanhope, but we're talking to a lot of third parties around, new asset management mandates with them. So actually, just, if I'm honest, looking forward to growing the business and the platform, and talking to others and looking at new assets.
Challenging yourself, pushing things forward, and setting the bar as high as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a question as we kind of look to draw this to a close that I ask everyone on the podcast is, if you had £500 million worth of equity, who are the people, what property, in which place would you look to deploy that capital? So you have to wear your transactions hat. Where and what, because it's an interesting time in the market right now.
No, definitely. And I was actually chatting to Joe Binns about this question in the office. He was a bit of a sounding board on that. So Joe, thanks for your kind of chat on this. And we were chatting, and I was very much saying still a life science play, but I think ideally if I could halve it, that would be good. So I think it would be 250. You didn't say yes, by the way, but I'm assuming I can do this. You
can slice it however you like.
It's going to be 250 into the life science story, definitely. I think the aging population, the healthcare crisis, the whole kind of, we've got the best universities and the best hospitals here. I think, it's a solid bet, every day of the week. I think, there's a little bit of risk around some of the capital from the VC funding slowed down a bit now.
Interesting.
But that's definitely, if I could buy White City Place again, that's 100%, what you'd be looking at. And just to qualify that slightly more, I think there's lots of assets. Lots of people are branding assets at the moment as lab-enabled or for life sciences. But when we're talking about life science, we're talking about the whole ecosystem. So these are assets that are really well placed, either across the road from a great university like Imperial, next to the Hammersmith Hospital for clinical trials, where you have the whole ecosystem. That's where traditionally they do very, very well. And then the other 250. Matt, I think, if you're a cash purchaser, particularly right now, there's no value add that debt can add in the current market. It's got to be, something like 8 Bishopsgate, absolutely, best in class, quality product. It's got to be an asset like that, particularly as office supply is going to get more and more tricky in 25, 26 and 27. There's just been less development. So I think, the fundamentals of that are, absolutely
best in class offices.
Best in class offices is where I'd put it.
So London for both life sciences and office.
Actually, life science could be in Oxford.
You look at Oxford as well.
Yeah.
Nice. And then the people. Is there anyone outside of your team that you look across the market and go, I'd love to get them involved?
Oh yeah, loads.
Who?
I couldn't possibly.
You couldn't say.
There'd be loads.
All on your board.
Got my eyes.
The board you can't afford.
Oh no. But no, definitely. Yeah, there's the talent that's coming through now is a different league, and I think the how we stay connected at the moment has massively helped that.
Yeah.
I think people are so proactive. I think it's a completely different mindset to how it was. I think, all of the initiatives around diversity are fantastic for the property industry. So, yeah, I've got my eyes on a few. Watch this space.
One thing we didn't touch on,
Go on.
is ESG and sustainability.
Oh, yes, of course.
Where does that fit into the equation? Because that must be a big chunk on your, but also your team's plate right now.
No, absolutely. So ESG, it's a huge opportunity. We see got, commitments for net carbon by 2030, reducing energy consumption, aspirations about renewable energy in all of our portfolios. And it's very much for us around data, and data is key on that.
Yeah.
And actually, as part of that, we've made the decision not only to recruit within my own team as an ESG, Dan Rafferty, who's on our ESG side, but we actually put ESG managers within our portfolios, within the estates teams. Because what we realise around ESG and our whole ESG agenda, and for anyone listening, they should check out the Stanhope ESG reports with all of our amazing statistics in, mega plug, but it's brilliant and very detailed around all of our targets and our results actually as well. But we realised that we've got only a small amount of actual control. We've got a bit bigger amount of responsibility in that ESG agenda. And then we've got an area of kind of where we can persuade and influence people. And because the control is really only within the landlord areas, not obviously in the tenant areas or with your investor, we've just found that having an ESG manager sitting, with the coalface, with our occupiers, talking about the ESG agenda with those occupiers on their, monthly meets, sharing data, particularly if you don't have any real kind of ESG lease, covenants in the leases. We have some, but they're typically not necessarily binding right now. That will change, I'm sure, going forward. That persuading, influencing kind of role has been working wonders. And an example of that is we have smart optimization programs across our portfolios, and really just understanding how the building is used and working, and looking at the BMS. We've made 20% savings.
What's BMS?
Building management system.
No technicality.
Technicality. So there's just a number of ways that we're kind of grappling with ESG, but it's hugely important. It's a hugely important part of the asset management business.
Well, look, thank you so much for coming into the People Property Place television studios.
It's a rename.
Yeah, a rebrand,
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your background, route, views on the market. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see what you and the team go on to deliver.
Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the People Property Place podcast. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it with a friend or colleague. Subscribe, give us a rating, like or comment. It helps tremendously. It'd be great to hear from you on LinkedIn. I'm super open-minded to recommendations of guests we should get on the podcast, or areas of the market we should explore further. So do drop me a message. The People Property Place podcast is powered by Rockbourne. The team recruit experienced talent for investors, owners, developers, and operators. So if you're considering your career options at the moment, or looking to attract top talent to work for you, head over to the website www.rockbourne.com, where you can find a wealth of research to aid your search. Have a great day wherever you are, and I look forward to catching you next time.